Hi everyone, I am Jessica Berliner. I am the nutritionist here at Well in Montclair, and I am back for my series, third talk of the series for Wellness Wednesdays. And today we are talking hormones. I'm calling it hormones through the ages because our hormones are different through all stages of life. Plus a little whimsy, right? So, you know, one of the things that people are not aware of is, and sorry, men, I'm going to kind of leave you out for today. I'm really going to focus more on the women's hormones. But in my next series that I do, I will make sure to focus on some of those men's hormones because they are just as important, just very different. So, what are hormones? They are chemical messengers. So, that are created by our endocrine system. So that is a system dedicated to hormones, which could be for women, we primarily think of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Those are the main three sex hormones, but there's other ones as well. There's pregnenolone, which is our mother hormone. All of the other hormones are created from it. There's also DHEA. It specifically helps with that androgen pathway of estrogen and testosterone. And then there are many different little forms of progesterones and estrogens and out there. So, but there are other hormones that we don't tend to think of because they are not necessarily sex hormones. Cortisol is our stress hormone. It is created from our adrenal glands, which are little glands above our kidneys. We also have insulin, is a hormone that helps regulate blood sugar. It helps with energy, weight management. And we also have our thyroid hormones. Our thyroid is a butterfly shaped gland right around the neck that is really about metabolism, body temperature, as well as other systems as well, or other symptoms as well. They are all the sex hormones, our thyroid hormones, and insulin are all part of what we call the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal complex, so the HPA system or axis. And so I'm not going to be talking about cortisol, insulin, or thyroid today. I'm kind of going to try to just simplify it and talk about those sex hormones, but it doesn't mean that thyroid or cortisol or insulin don't come up in how we balance that. That HPA axis, I kind of like to say that it almost is like a triangle. So the H, the P, and the A are each sides of it. And if one is off, it can throw off the others. So sometimes people will say, I was great, my thyroid was well balanced, and then I hit menopause and it went crazy, or I hit a high time of stress and my cycle is no longer regulated well. So when that comes up, that's how those sometimes are really connected. And it's really important. But again, hormones can get very complex. I'm going to need a lot more time to really discuss it. And it really is personalized on each person about how we go about handling those issues that arise. So, back to the sex hormones. Main ones for women, right? Estrogen. It is the primary reproductive hormone that we think of. It affects bone density. It's really like our gas pedal, it revs us up. And progesterone helps regulate our menstrual cycle, supports healthful pregnancy, balances our mood, and it also acts as our brake pedal, calms us down. So, a lot of times when women are having hormonal sleep issues, it could be because of either low progesterone or an imbalance in the estrogen and progesterone. And that's something that we see a little bit later on in life, but can happen at all stages. And testosterone, not just for men. We have it in a lot lower levels, but we still have it, and it's still extremely important for our energy, for retaining and gaining muscle mass, for libido, and for our drive, ambition. Those things do come up, and we really want to look at testosterone when that is an issue. So hormones through the ages. Puberty and our early adulthood is where hormones really start to fluctuate. They're starting to ramp up because early in life there is no menstrual cycle, there is no ovulation, so hormones are really not at play. Puberty, we start seeing young girls getting their menstrual cycle. We start to see their body change, their hips starting to widen. They'll start to develop breast tissue, and those are related to those hormonal shifts. Some of the common concerns that come up during those times, and again, early adulthood, is PMS, acne, mood swings, and that's happening because of different hormone fluctuations, but that can be related to nutritional deficiencies. It can be related to hormone imbalances that could be coming up from toxicity levels. There are different chemicals out there that are what we call endocrine disruptors. They disrupt our endocrine system, hormone system. A lot of those are in plastics, they're in skincare, they're in hair care, they're in makeup. There are lists out there if you're trying to reduce some of those toxins, and I'm happy to help provide some resources. They're constantly evolving and changing, but it's become a big topic, especially in the nutrition and wellness space. One of the things that I like to always suggest to young girls who are either just starting to get their period or are having menstrual concerns early on is one of the first things you do is start balancing blood sugar. And that's where that insulin piece comes in, right? Because blood sugar and inflammation can play a large role in those early hormone fluctuations and issues. And that can kind of be that first step in helping to manage any of the symptoms related to some of those other problems. But there's different ways to kind of look about it. And so again, first thing is regulate that blood sugar. It could be through different dietary interventions. It could be through exercise. So really balancing out your nutrition in that time of life will help set the stage for your hormones, not only early on, but later on in life. Because things with hormones don't just happen overnight. They take time and they evolve. And, it's like knees, right? If people have knee pain and they keep running on them, then there's more damage that's created. Our pancreas, where insulin is, created, is like that. If we're constantly having blood sugar issues, eventually that issue becomes worse over time. The same thing with hormones, the same thing with toxicity. Our bodies kind of build up and store some of those things. So if we got younger girls earlier on to kind of start managing those, then they're going to have an easier time with fertility. They're going to have an easier time with their ovulations, their pregnancy, and also then perimenopause and menopause. As crazy as it sounds to think about menopause for a young girl, but what you do earlier in life can affect those later times in life. And so, fertility and pregnancy, but that time where we are as women starting to think about creating a family or even just that stage of life, right? Because it's similar to that puberty, early adolescence stage, but maybe we have a different goal for that. And so a lot of times, more and more we're seeing fertility challenges come up. And it's pretty unfortunate, but those rates are getting higher and higher. Again, some of this is toxicity, some of it is nutritional deficiencies, some of it is blood sugar balance, and some of it is other concerns that we're seeing, like PCOS or endometriosis. And the sad part is a lot of women have those issues prior to their fertility journey, but they're not addressed, they're not diagnosed. So that's why I'm kind of putting them in that stage of life, is because that's where they tend to come up. That's where we're learning about them more. But it doesn't mean that it's not the reason for younger girls having issues with their menstrual cycles or anything like that. There's still an issue. A lot of times we're seeing that they're just not diagnosed early on. It's only when really what happens is if a younger girl goes in with a lot of hormonal concerns, they're given the birth control pill and they say, we'll deal with it when you're trying to get pregnant. And we are seeing that a lot. Not every doctor, but a lot of them. So again, a lot of these are getting diagnosed a little bit later in life when girls or women are starting to think about their fertility journey. And so again, there is a lot that can be done with nutrition, lifestyle modifications to try to help mitigate symptoms, to help with fertility, with ovulation, and with pregnancy. Again, I'll probably say it over and over again. Blood sugar balance is one of the most important ones, especially with PCOS, endometriosis. We see a connection. But also, there are different things that come up, like there's genetic mutations that affect fertility. One in particular is called the MTHFR gene, and that gene can actually be linked to high rates of infertility, and it's linked to a system called methylation. It's how we utilize B vitamins, folic acid, folate. So when you hear folic acid is important for pregnancy, it's actually folate or methylfolate that's important. And about 30-40% of the population have this gene, the MTHFR gene, where they cannot convert folic acid to folate. And that can affect fertility, early pregnancy, and actually is related to cardiovascular disease, mental health, and mood disorders. So when we talk about how things are connected, that's another, way that it's coming up. But now, like, if we're skipping ahead and we're talking about pregnancy, in general, it sounds like it should be simple to grow a baby, right? But, an egg takes about 3 months to mature before it can be, before sperm can actually help to create the embryo. And so what you do for 3 months prior to conception actually will live in that egg. So, when people say, I'm going to do a big detox, I'm going to try to get pregnant, you really want to be slow. You want to be gentle because whatever is in that egg is going to last for 3 months. So usually with fertility, it's a huge passion of mine. I love working with women with fertility challenges, pregnancy, because I think it's such a special and sometimes a really uncared for time in life, because we think it should be simpler than sometimes it is. But usually you want to start anything that you're doing almost 6 months prior, and you want to be really stable for the 3 months prior if possible. Again, just because of what is going to be living in that egg that becomes the embryo. And so then in pregnancy, there's food aversions. It sounds simple, right? Eat well, move, do the things. You're going to have a healthy baby. But what if you can't? What if you are averse to all of the foods that you had prepped and thought were going to be the best for pregnancy? And the only thing that sounds good is Doritos, right? So not to hate or love on any specific food, but we want to make sure that we're being compassionate towards that. There's always different ways to get in foods that you need or are trying to help support pregnancy, and even supplementation if necessary. But there's also then issues around gestational diabetes, hypertension that come up. There's thyroid issues that come up during pregnancy. So really trying to make sure that you are supporting different systems. And a lot of times, again, gestational diabetes is a type of diabetes, so related to blood sugar, that happens in pregnancy. So again, insulin, blood sugar comes in really important during that time and balancing it. So, there's a few different tricks that we have in the nutrition world to really help balance that and modify it, because gestational diabetes can happen to very healthy people. This is not about whether you are healthy or unhealthy sometimes going into pregnancy. It really is sometimes just how your body is responding to different things. But it can also be what you've chosen to either put in. It could be the stress. It could be all different things. Stress affects blood sugar in a way that people don't realize. And So if you're having a stressful pregnancy or stressful time during pregnancy, could raise your blood sugar. Also, there's a lot of false positives, false negatives related to gestational diabetes testing. So how you go about responding to it can depend where your numbers were during that time, or how you live your life in general. Um, and so then there's the postpartum period, right? So, postpartum, getting your hormones back to, and I say back to, but they may have never been normal. They might be trying to get normal, but getting them back to a non-pregnancy place can take sometimes a year. Not, it could be more, especially depending on whether you're breastfeeding or not, and what your postpartum recovery has looked like. So again, I'm not going to go around that too much, just because that is so individualized, but that journey can look different for all women. And so sometimes people feel crazy for what they're going through, but again, each journey is different. Each day of our cycle is different. So when that's one of the big differences with women and men is, a traditional menstrual cycle for women is about 28 days, or can be somewhere between 28 to 35 days. And so day one of your cycle looks very different than day 12 of your cycle. Day 12 of your cycle looks very different than day 25 of your cycle. And so that's where, you might be having mood swings. And sometimes it's not in that PMS phase. Sometimes it's more that day 12 to 15, 16 phase. And that's when ovulation happens. And that's when hormones are spiking up. And that's a common time where people will have shifts that they don't realize are going on. So really looking at the different phases of your cycle. And again, I might go into that at a different time. I really wanted to do broad overview because hormones are a lot. But so the different phases of our menstrual cycle look very, very different, and how our body responds, how we feel, bloating, digestion, all of those things change throughout our cycle. And those are things that people don't necessarily relate to hormones. Hair loss related to hormones, brain fog, memory, weight gain, and autoimmune disease. Can be highly affected and related to different hormonal shifts. A lot of people will develop an autoimmune disease, or it'll at least turn on in different hormonal times of life, like pregnancy or menopause. And the same thing, right? Brain fog, memory can be because of low hormones, low estrogen. So one of the things that you hear a lot in moving on to the next phase is perimenopause or menopause, right? How many women say, I can't remember what's been going on? Our hormones are dipping. They are starting to lower, specifically progesterone and estrogen, even though testosterone does as well. But the things that we get the most dramatic symptoms from, hot flashes, night sweats, weight gain, is from the fluctuations in the progesterone and estrogen. And then when testosterone again is shifting as well, and it's important for maintaining muscle mass during that time, especially because bone density is such an issue, right? So and bones are protected by estrogen. So when estrogen dips, that's where we start to see osteopenia, osteoporosis. That's why, women, why is osteopenia not an issue for the first 50 years of your life for the most part? And that's because you have enough estrogen to protect those bones. But as soon as that starts to dip, so do the bones. There's a lot more turnover in the bones. And so that's where you're looking at how to support those hormones, whether it is reducing the toxins that are disrupting your endocrine system, whether it is using herbs to help support your hormones, whether it's using bioidentical hormone replacement, or also whether it's different nutritional things or lifestyle factors, maybe really making sure you have a solid exercise routine. Again, blood sugar balance, having fiber, having different things that support gut health, that can support different hormonal mechanisms. As well as some of the different fibers can also be what we call phytoestrogens. So it can help support those estrogen hormones during that time. And